In creating home, we all want it to be the perfect representation of how we see it, how we visualize it. But one thing that I want to make sure was that I don't go into a lot of debt doing it. And realistically speaking, that's something that's going to happen, inevitable. But the debt that I can control was what I wanted to go in debt over it. And one of the things was my kitchen counter. When I decided it was time to change that, I didn't want to go into debt over it. So I made a thought process on how I could accomplish this without going into debt over it. And I'm going to share with you what I did on how I got them for a fraction of the cost. And that, my friends, is how my thrifting paid off. My name is Jamela. Thank you again for tuning in for another episode of Living the Lifestyle of the Thrift and Famous. And as always, I'm glad you're here. When I finally decided to change the countertops, it had been 20 years, and I said, it's just time for this blue to go. I've lived with it long enough, and I'm over it. So I had to think, how could I accomplish it without hitting the budget? And that's when I decided to start thrifting items to sell. And I knew I had at least 150 items that I could sell for $10. And I'm going to share with you everything that I sold and how much I sold them for. This wooden platter, that's when, Bohemian stuff was coming in. So I sold that for $20. Then I had this crystal candle holder. Now I had a pair of these, but I bought these many, many years ago. But I sold that one candle holder for $20. And this vintage recipe stand, which are hard to find, and I really didn't want to let it go, but I wanted my countertops more, so I let that go, and I sold that for $40. And next up was this pillow. This pillow I sold for $60. Now this was a raised velvet fabric rather, and I found the fabric in a bin for $2. And again, this pillow here sold for $60. Again, I bought a couple yards of that fabric for $5. This bar set, I sold it for $45. And then this Lefton it's a Lefton china, and it's hand painted plate. I sold that for $25. I got it for $2. Now, those things are very collectible, but anything that I buy, I try to keep it under $40. This mid-century decanter, I bought it for $2 because there was a chip on the lid, but I was actually able to sell that for $39, and I was happy about that. And it was supposed to be a keeper, but I decided to let it go. I said, well, if it sells, that's nice. If it doesn't, I'll keep it. And then I found these English tollware trays, which are very pretty. Again, I had planned on keeping these, but I decided to let those go, and I sold that set for $45. It was a set of 10. This beautiful Murano style glass bowl was very nice. I got it for $5, but I sold it for $45. Again, I hated to let it go, but I had my countertops as my eyes on the prize. And I find, little vases and stuff. So this one was kind of Art Deco like. I did like it for $2, but I decided to let that go, and I sold that for $25. Not bad, but again, I'm glad it made some money on this sale. The peacock silhouettes, those were very nice, and I had them on my walls for a while, but I was time to get rid of peacocks. I was trying to kind of steer away from those, so I decided to sell those, and I sold that pair for $160. Now those were given to me, so that was a blessing. these candle holders, which were very, very nice. And I spent $70 on them. However, it was because I loved them and my plan was to keep them. But I decided to let them go and I sold them for $175. And looking back at them, I kind of regret it, but I love my countertops better. Yeah, so another one bites the dust. And then this woven fish, I bought that for $12 and I sold it for $50. I was shocked, but I did some research on these and they sell for kind of like about $100, but that was a designer name one and I wasn't sure if this was, so I just let it go. And this brass Art Deco lamp, I paid $5 for it, and I sold that lamp for $100. So that was a nice profit. It was a keeper, but I decided to let it go because I think I needed a pair. And then this fabric here for this pillow, I paid like $20 for the fabric. However, I sold the pillow for $60. I had some left over from a pair that I had already made. And I was happy about that sale because I still have my two that I originally made. Now, this painting, the artist, I went to an antique shop and they had them buy one, get one free. So one was $75 and I kept the other one. So I sold that one and I kept the other one. And this is the one that I kept, and I had a frame and it fit perfect in that frame, so it hangs in one of my guest rooms. So yeah, I do like that. I'm glad I decided to keep it. But anyway, I sold the other one for $100. And as I'm looking at it, I kind of wish I would have kept it, but that's okay. Countertop focus. And then I had this deer head with the antlers, whatever you call this. But I said, let me see if this will sell. And I decided to post it out there and I sold it for $90. And this was some fabric that my mother had her chairs reupholstered with, and it was leftover fabric. So I had some pillows made and I sold a pair of them for $120. It's a beautiful pastel chinoiserie fabric, and yeah, I wanted to keep them, but nope, couldn't do that. These Gothic candle holders, I found those at a Goodwill, and I thought I was going to keep them again, but I said, they're too heavy for me, so I sold them for $70. And then I come across oil paintings all the time. And this was a small oil painting. It was the size of, I think, a 9 by 12. Very nice original oil painting, and it was signed, but it was only $5. And I sold that painting for $35. And this pillow that I made also, I sold that for $65. And the peacock pillow I sold for $65. This was leftover fabric from when I was just going around getting fabrics and had different projects, and that was left over. This marble stand, it's like an ashtray, but I bought that for $5 and I sold it for $55. I let go a lot of stuff that, as I'm looking back at this, that I wish I would have kept, but as they say, you can't keep it all. But anyway, next up is this filigree lamp that I bought. I paid $20 for this lamp, and I turned around and sold this lamp for $180. Your girl was really hustling and looking for some really good finds to sell. Then I found this lampshade. These are very, very collectible, and they're nice to have. So I bought that lampshade for $10 and I sold it for $135. It was in perfect shape. Yeah, it found its new home in New York. But anyway, moving on along, I used to collect these mid-century ashtrays. I got that one for $2 because they're down here a lot. but I wind up selling that ashtray for $45. And then I remember popping into a store on my way to visit a girlfriend, and I saw this pair of mid-century lamps. They were $12. I was going to keep them for my bedroom because they're like Art Deco. However, the blue threw me off and I just couldn't bear keeping them. I sold them for $210. And you all remember me saying I used to get lamps for like $5. Another $5 lamp, I sold it for $55. And again, I see what this style is selling for, but I undercut what my asking price is. So at least I know mine will sell. Now this cast iron bulldog, again, I had that for years and years. And it was time to let that go. And I sold that for $120. That's those bull terriers doorstops, but highly collectible, but I let it go. And remember I told you I like to collect mid-century ashtrays. This was a hanging one and I was going to keep it. So I did spend $60 on it. I didn't like it after I bought it, and I decided to sell it, and I sold it for $120. And this cameo ashtray sat on my vanity for decades, and I decided to sell that because I'm not using it. It was Victorian, and I'm not getting out of the Victorian era, and I sold it for $35. And this cute menu set with the place cards, I've had those for decades, and I decided to let it go, and then I regret it when the Avon set the table last Thanksgiving and said we need place cards. But anyway, I sold that for $38. And next up, you know I love my vintage barware. But when I saw that a set of this imperial glass went for $1,200, I decided to let a few of mine go to see what I can get for them. So I sold 4 of mine for $250. You know, nowhere near the price that sold on First Dibs, but I don't sell on First Dibs. I sell on Cherish. So I was happy about that. And then this mirror I bought from an estate sale, and I paid $50 for it. And I sold that mirror for $300, and it was in Charleston. So I decided to drive that down there because I didn't want nothing to happen to that mirror getting broken. So I spent a day trip and delivered it myself. Last but not least, this mirror here, I listed it for sale. It was the ugliest mirror and it cut me. So I couldn't wait to get rid of it. Besides, it didn't match my style. It was a leftover from an estate sale that they didn't want it. I just took it because it was interesting. Come to find out, it was called Brutalist. So anyway, I sold that mirror for $700. And I couldn't believe it. It is in New York in somebody's home, and I'm glad they got it. So if you're desiring to do something that's a budget crunch, do what I did. Go thrifting or sell some items. What I did was narrow it down to I could sell 200 items for $10. That's $2,000. So, you just got to play with your numbers and then figure out what you need to make, it happen. And make sure you save diligently, because I didn't touch anything that I sold that was specifically for my countertops. So I hope you learned from my adventures on trying to get my countertops, and maybe you too can follow that kind of guideline. But I just wanted to share that and create my beautiful kitchen that I love. Because remember, beauty is being home and loving it. Thank you again for tuning in. And if you like this video, please drop me a comment. Don't forget to like and share.